So I very recently completed the PWK. For those of you that are not aware, that is the lab component to the OSCP, the 858 monster of a PDF with tons of exercises and all that. I did all the extra credit except for a few of the lab machines that I need to do write-ups on. But I completed the core of this here. And I wanted to give a review on it because I had the privilege of taking the PWK back in 2018 with the old PDF guide they gave you and the old exercises, right? And now I'm able to compare that to the new 2020 update. So I wanted to go section by section and give you guys my honest feedback, my review of how it compares to the old stuff and how it is overall. Is it good, right? So I know a lot of you guys are, watch this channel. You're interested in pursuing the OSCP. Maybe you're working on a few things in preparation for it. Maybe you're already in it, and maybe you want to think, see what I think about certain sections. How well do they prepare you? Things like that. So I'm going to cover that in this video. I'm going to waste no time though, because this is a very, very long PDF guide. Like I said, 850 plus pages. We start with chapter 1, but there's not really much to talk about there. It's just the ground rules, exam attempts, reporting, all of that stuff. Where we really get into the technical content is in chapter 2, and this is where they cover Linux. They mention Kali Linux here, but I want to point out that these things, a lot of what they cover here is not specific to Kali. Most of it will apply to other flavors of Linux as well. But from what I remember in this section, it's pretty similar to what they covered in the old PDF. And it's sufficient, honestly. It's good information, and definitely if you're new to pen testing, it's going to help you a lot to really streamline your workflow. Well, not really this section, but the sections coming up. This is more like, hey, this is the Linux OS, and this is what this is, and this is what that is. Environment variables are in chapter 3, and they're just covering more stuff like that. And now when we get into text searching, manipulation and stuff, this is the part that's going to improve your workflow and things like that. And they pretty much covered all the same stuff in the old document, I would say. But nonetheless, a very good section. And now we come to chapter 4 with Netcat. This, I believe, the same as before. But now with 4.2, SOCAT. This is new. And this was really good to know. The way I'm familiar with using SOCAT is, just as I said in one of my videos a month or so ago, the way that, a lot of times IPSec uses it for tunneling and stuff like that, the redirection and tunneling. But just like Netcat, it's a very versatile tool, and you could use it for reverse shells and things like that, file transfers. And I think one of the best use cases outside of the tunneling stuff that you can do with it is use it for encrypted bind shells. So that was really cool, getting hands-on with that stuff. And then another, basically chapter 4 was a huge improvement upon the old guide, because they also finally now include PowerShell and even PowerCat as well. I thought this was super helpful, super handy. We covered so much Linux in all the courses, but now we have PowerShell as well, which, especially with the shift to the newer Windows servers that you're going up against, in the old version, hardly any of them had PowerShell, or not very fully, modern PowerShell, let's say. They had old PowerShell. Now that we have more updated servers, it makes sense that they include this section. And of course, because Active Directory is now in on the exam. So yeah, great addition, I would say. And Wireshark, I believe they had this in the old one. It's good to know. It can really help you break down protocols and stuff like that, things that you don't know what the network is doing. Fire up Wireshark. TCP dump, I felt like they gave me more information than I would ever actually use, but who knows? Sometimes you find use for things years later that you don't think you would find useful. But hey, it's better to err on the side of more information, I suppose. So then bash scripting, they had this in the last one, but I think they added these practical examples, which I thought were really cool. Now, for me, I'm a lot more experienced with bash scripting. It's something that I've been doing for years and years now, but for someone that's new, I think this would be a very good improvement, very good section for them, and even seeing the practical usage. I'm going to be honest, a lot of these early sections, I just flew through it. I just kind of skimmed the material, went to the exercises, and basically just skim stuff because a lot of it was review, but this was a lot more thorough, I felt like. So very, very good section, I would say. The passive information gathering, this was really cool. They added a lot more. I think they might have had some Shodan stuff, but they might not have. I like how they included Pastebin, and they included a lot more stuff in this one. I think that's the common sentiment across the board. There's just a lot more stuff in this guide. But I thought this was a very good section. Social media tools as well. So yeah, just a lot of stuff here. And then active information gathering. This is the part where I was really excited because this is where it gets hands-on and it gets a lot closer to what you're going to be doing in the labs and on the exam. And this is where I felt like they really did a solid job here. So I will say there were certain sections that I was like, okay, they're missing this tool and they're missing that tool, or this is the old way I would have done it, but there's newer tools that I would use for this protocol or that protocol. And I get it, right? They have to come up with the curriculum. It's always going to be a little bit out of date, just kind of how like higher education is always out of date. So I understand that. And obviously there's so many tools in this space and everyone has their own preferences. You couldn't possibly cover every tool. I think when it came to, I want to say SMB enumeration, they left out a few tools and things like that I'd probably use. Obviously, like I said in another video, no mention whatsoever of Crack Map Exec, which is a tool that I would use for certain things, like SMB enumeration especially. So when it came to that, that's where I was like, okay, they're missing a little bit of stuff here that I personally would have liked. But on the whole, very good section here. They show you how to enumerate pretty much all the common services you're going to be going up against on the OSCP. Well, I say that, but now that I'm looking at it, I guess they don't include FTP and certain other ones. But you do see these services a lot on the OSCP is what I'm saying. So vulnerability scanning. This was a section that I was dreading at first because I don't like running vulnerability scanners, but then I actually was very pleasantly surprised here because in the old version, they only show you how to use a tool called OpenVOS. But now in this one, you're actually scanning with Nessus. So it's, a lot of companies use Nessus. So it's a lot more practical of a section, I definitely think. And the stuff they teach you on there, I know from my own job experience that it's like, yeah, that's something you would need to know as a pen tester. So I thought they did a great job here. Even though it's something you can't use on the exam, still pay attention in this section because it's going to help you in the real world. It's going to help you on interviews and things like that, which for a lot of you guys, that's probably your goal, right? Interviews and getting a job in this field. So don't skimp out on this section just because it's not on the exam. Now, web application attacks, number 9 here. They cover a lot of stuff. Once again, they have their tool preferences very clearly, right? I prefer GoBuster. Some people prefer FUF. None of that's on here or even mentioned. So just something to keep in mind, right? If you're new to this, maybe you want to supplement by watching some IPSEC or other content creators, maybe some of my content if you want, and see what tools I use or what tools other people use. And you might find something that you prefer over the way that they showed you how to do it here. With that being said, web application attacks are a massive, massive subject matter, and they couldn't possibly cover all of the vulnerabilities. So even, just looking at this one, right? I like that they cover cross-site scripting, but you're not going to really need to know that for the OSCP. Typically, you don't see this on CTFs. It's going to be something that's going to lead to file read access or code execution, something like that. So directory traversal, file inclusion, SQL injection, that kind of stuff. Now, with buffer overflows, it was pretty similar to before. They added some newer applications that you're exploiting. In some cases, it was the same as the old guide, but I think most of the stuff was the same. There was a few extra questions and exercises it made you do, but for the most part, this was the same. So, and honestly, I think that it's good for what it tries to do, right? It's teaching you as a very beginner how to do buffer overflow exploits. It's not practical at all, and that's fine. Like there's no DEP, no ASLR, none of that, no protections, right? But that's not the point, right? The point is to teach you how to do buffer overflows, what they are, and things like that. And for that, I think it does a good enough job. And obviously, if you encounter it on the exam, which you may, this is going to be very relevant. So no complaints there. It did take me a long time to do that section because there's a lot of extra stuff they ask for in the questions without giving away any information there. But client-side attacks, I thought this was a huge improvement. It was such a pain to do the old one because it involved exploiting some ancient version of a web browser, something that's not practical at all anymore because no one uses browsers that old that are vulnerable to the client-side attacks they're having you do. But with this one, it's actually very practical now because they have the Microsoft Office Word macros and even Excel macros, things like that. I thought that was really cool. That's something that I wanted to learn more about. I know a lot of the red teamers are doing stuff like this all the time, so it was really cool to get hands-on with this stuff as well. So I thought this section was very well done overall. And they're even including how to locate public exploits. We talked about that a few times on this channel. I thought that was pretty good. And even how to fix exploits. I thought this was something that's very much needed in the guide because in the old guide, they didn't really cover fixing exploits. You just kind of had to figure it out as you went along. But now they actually give you examples, show you how to do the stuff. So I thought that was very good. File transfers as well. They give you all different kinds of ways that you can do the file transfers on Linux and Windows, which I know for a lot of people, how do you do it on Windows? You know, you're so used to Linux all the time, and then you encounter your first Windows system, and you're like, okay, well, how do I transfer the files, right? This is going to help you a lot in that regard. Of course, there's always more methods they don't cover because there's so many ways to do file transfers, but I'm really glad that they included that. Antivirus evasion, I thought this was really cool that they included this as well. Obviously, it's not the focus of the course. That's more so the follow-up course, the OS EP, but I'm glad they still included it, and some boxes that you would encounter have antivirus on them, and you're going to need to use some of these techniques or maybe techniques that you prefer in order to bypass them. So I don't think that was on the last version of the PWK. So if that is the case, then I don't really remember, but if that is the case, it's a much needed improvement. Also, privilege escalation. They didn't have this last time. They teach you a bunch of different privilege escalation techniques. I thought this was super handy, super helpful, especially for new people. But even for me, I think I want to say there was a couple here and there. Well, just looking at these, I know I've done all of these, but there might have been one here or there that it was a good refresher, right? Obviously, another topic where they couldn't cover everything. They couldn't possibly cover everything, and that's fine. But I think that even what they have here is a great improvement. Wordless, I didn't really invest too much time in this section. There wasn't any exercises for it, to just full disclaimer here. And this is something that I've done a lot. I've done a lot of Hydra stuff. I didn't really spend too much time here. So I can't really comment too much on how good that was, but I just looking at what it covers, yeah, these are pretty standard things you're going to want to know how to do, especially this. So yeah, I think it would be good for new people for sure. And then leveraging the password hashes. What do you do after you get them? How can you crack them? It seemed like they had a bit of a bias towards John. I prefer Hashcat, so that's the only issue I have with that section. But hey, it's all preference, right? And then I don't think they mentioned that you shouldn't do it in a VM, but yeah, don't crack your hashes in a VM. Do it on your host system so you can leverage the power of your graphics card. Now, for port redirection and tunneling, this is super handy. I wish they would have covered some of the more modern tool sets like Chisel. They did not, but they did cover a bunch of different ways to do it with SSH and Plink if you so prefer Plink. If you're on a Windows system and you're not using Chisel, then you're going to want to use Plink for the most part. And they teach you some NetSH stuff. I thought this was a good section. I'm glad they included this. And then Active Directory. You guys know my thoughts on Active Directory section on here already. If you don't, go ahead and check out the video. I'll link it down in the description below because I had a lot to say about that. And this video is getting a little lengthy, so let's just keep on going here. Metasploit. I'm glad they include this. Pay attention on this section, guys. I know a lot of people go anti-Metasploit on this because you can only use it one time on the exam. I mean, yeah, sure, that's true, but it has a lot of value, and learning this stuff is really important because it's going to help you a lot in the real world, okay? and it's going to help you on job interviews, and you can use it once on the exam. So you're doing yourself a real disservice if you don't pay attention to this section, because this is a pretty well-written section. It has a lot of good information on here. And PowerShell Empire, I'm so glad that they are including a C2 framework now. If I had my preference, I would say I would rather them have covered maybe a... obviously, they can't do Cobalt Strike because it's a licensed product, but maybe an open source one like Covenant, right? That would have been cool. But obviously, you know, being what it is for the fact that they have to come up with the curriculum for this much in advance, and there's a long process until it gets put into the actual PWK, I understand. And here's the thing. It's still very useful, even though most people aren't using this framework anymore, and that is because, you know, a C2 framework, if you can learn one, it's kind of like learning a programming language. If you can learn one, you can learn any other one, because there's so many similarities and things that are common amongst the different C2 frameworks. So with that in mind, this is going to help you a lot, even if you end up using Cobalt Strike, as most people here probably will. They go into red teaming and things like that. So pay attention on this section is basically what I'm saying. It's a good section. The only gripe that I have with it is that there's so many exercises that, you know, things from the guide where they're like, hey, run this command to install this and run this module and do this. Only come to find out when you do that, it errors out. It doesn't work. And then you go into the forums and you find out, oh yeah, that's no longer maintained. That doesn't work anymore. Here's what you need to do instead. Run this command instead. Install it this way instead of how they said to install it in the guide. And all that stuff is just really annoying. And I had to look up a lot of forum posts to figure out how to get things to work in PowerShell Empire on this section. So keep that in mind. Not the best section, but I'm glad they included some kind of C2 framework at least. And then this is the last section here. They had this in the last one, except now it's way more hands-on, where you're able to replicate all the things they're talking about. If I'm not mistaken, in the old one, I think that, you know, and I don't want to be spreading misinformation here, but so don't quote me 100% on this, but I believe that their breakdown at the very end of the old guide was more of a example, you know, hypothetical scenario that they talked you through. With this one, they're actually using the lab environment, so you can follow their steps. And if you want to get the extra credit, you kind of have to. But basically, you can get hands-on with it. So you're not just listening to an example scenario. You're listening and then replicating. So I thought this was really good to tie everything together and allow you to see how all this stuff comes together. So very well done there. Overall, I really like the updated PWK. I just feel like some of the stuff was really time-consuming, while not even really difficult necessarily for me. There was a lot of little issues where I had to go to the forums because something wasn't working and things like that. But hey, that's the nature of it, right? This stuff, you know, hacking is finicky, right? So I can't fault them. I can only fault them so much. But overall, like the course, that's what I thought of each and every section. If you guys have any questions of, you know, you want me to further explain something, let me know down in the comments section below and I'll get to that. And yeah, in the meantime, if you want to get into more content about the OSCP, I have that on the screen right now for you. I'll see you guys over in those videos. Thanks for watching.